Hi everyone, it's Bake Along time and you need this easy applesauce bundt in your repertoire. Get it in the oven right now. It is that simple. You can whisk it by hand. I add some interesting spices, not your typical autumn spice blend. And I finish this cake off with a cream cheese glaze. This cake is to die for. It's my easy applesauce bundt. Seriously, this bundt recipe is as easy to whip up as a batch of muffins. And it does start with the apples in the form of applesauce. Make sure you buy unsweetened applesauce. I want you to be in charge of the sugar. And no mixer required. Just need a very large mixing bowl. And I'll add my sugars, a combination of granulated sugar and light brown sugar to this recipe. We are going to add some spices to this cake, so we want to play that up with the moisture and that sort of subtle caramel tone of the brown sugar. I'll give that a quick mix first, just to let the sugar dissolve into the applesauce a little bit. Do you make your own applesauce? Some people do. A slow cooker is a great tool, or a Instapot if you use one to make applesauce. But you know what? It's so easy to buy and affordable too. Instead of using butter or melted butter, I find vegetable oil works in this cake recipe really well. It helps to keep it fresh for days, which this is a cake that yields a lot of slices. You're going to get 16 to 20 slices out of a bundt, so you may need it sitting in the fridge or on the counter for a little while. 2 eggs. And just a touch of vanilla. And you just need to work the eggs and the oil in until everything is evenly combined. Super simple. All right, I'll set this aside for a second so I can sift the dry ingredients. So I've got my all-purpose flour and my leaveners, a combination of baking soda and baking powder with a little bit of salt. And the reason you see a recipe, especially like a bundt cake, that because of its size spends an hour in the oven, recipes like this often call for baking powder and baking soda, and that reason is specific. Now, baking soda reacts immediately in the mixing bowl. It's going to react with the acidity in the applesauce and start lifting the cake batter. Baking powder actually already has the acidity worked into it, but it needs heat to fully activate. So for a recipe like a bundt cake that takes a long time in the oven, baking soda isn't enough to keep it lifting. By the time it's expended itself, well, that baking powder is warmed up, it activates and continues that cake to rise beautifully. Now let's talk about the spices. I've got a combination of cinnamon, ground cardamom, and a little bit of allspice. So I'm kind of channeling those autumn vibes, but I really didn't want to go full-on pumpkin spice in the spice world. And there's a citrus note to cardamom that I think makes a cake like this completely seasonless. That said, if you want to go sweater weather with your applesauce cake, you could replace this volume, so a total of 1 tablespoon plus half a teaspoon, with that same measurement of a pumpkin pie spice or even a gingerbread spice blend. So in that goes, I'll give this a little sift. Bring back my mixing bowl so you can see what's happening. If it's easier for you, of course, you can sift right over the mixing bowl itself to spare yourself this extra step. That's how easy this recipe is. And now, a bundt does make a big batch of batter. We'll whisk this until it comes together, and then I like to take just about an extra 30 seconds to really whisk it thoroughly. A batter like this, with that volume of applesauce, I'm not worried about over mixing it. but I do want to build enough structure into it. Wow, I can feel, just by pulling my whisk through the batter, how that baking soda is indeed activating. All right, this is nice and smooth, so it's ready for the pan. This is a 10 cup, so a 2.5 liter, which is about as small. It's your average size Bundt pan. What is important, especially if you have a pan with lots of intricate detail, is that you grease it, then flour it. So you dust every surface with flour and you tip out the excess. If you don't tip out the excess, you're going to end up with white streaks on your Bundt cake. And the only white streaks we want on this Bundt cake is the cream cheese glaze that I'm going to put on top. So the batter goes into the pan. It's nice and fluid. And to help it along, I'll give it a little tap to level it out. And it will bake up over the course of 1 hour in a 325 oven to reach the top of the pan. And that's why the volume is important in your Bundt pan. So I'll pop this in the oven. See you in an hour. Here's the cake out of the oven. What I like to do when it comes to pretty much any cake recipe, I leave it to cool in the pan for about 15 to 20 minutes. When a cake comes out of the oven, it is so hot and all those molecules are moving around really quickly. And I know we've all done it. If you tip your cake out of the pan too soon, it's so fragile that half of it could stay in, half falls out of the pan, or you're missing a piece of it. But by letting the cake cool for about 15 to 20 minutes, it makes it easy to extract while it's still warm and then easy to cool completely before it's time to add the glaze. So that's my next step. And this is just a simple cream cheese glaze because I think it just is a perfect addition to an applesauce spiced Bundt cake. I've got half a package of cream cheese. And it's at room temperature, but what I like to do is soften it up a little bit. So I'm going to loosen up the cream cheese with a combination of icing sugar and a bit of milk. Here we go. I'll add half of my icing sugar first. There we go. It's starting to soften up the cream cheese a little bit so that when I add the milk, it will blend in smoothly. So I'll add my milk a little at a time, holding back some, because it really depends on the thickness of your cream cheese, the temperature of your cream cheese, how much you need to add. I'll start with a tablespoon. Kind of like when you're making a cheesecake, the first few additions of the liquid, it's important to mix it really well because once you get too far with the liquid additions, it's hard to work out any small lumps. This is looking nice and smooth, so I'll add a touch more milk and my vanilla. There we go. Now it's started thinning out the glaze. Lump free, and now I can add the remaining icing sugar. This is a great glaze to make if you want something to drizzle over cinnamon buns without it being a smear of frosting. It's more that classic drizzle, but it's still got the cream cheese flavor. Now let's just look at that thickness. You know what? It's got good body. It's running off the whisk slowly. So I don't need to add any more milk to it. All right. I just have to live with this mess, I guess, for the moment. So now for our ta-da, glazing the cake. What does help, actually, this is cooled to room temperature, but if you chill the cake, the cream cheese glaze will adhere and start setting immediately. So you might find you get fewer drips that way. I'm being very cautious right now. Live glazing. Somewhat slow motion. See, I've got a little bare patch here. Just coax it around. It's not like an icing sugar glaze made with milk that starts setting right away. So you've got a little time. Sort of coax it into place. How's that looking? Is that okay? All right, good. We've got some subtle drips, nothing too intense. If you wanted to, you could finish the top with a sprinkling of chopped toasted pecans or walnuts, or even just a pinch of cinnamon. But there you've got the essence, a delicious and super easy applesauce bundt with a cream cheese glaze. Who's ready for a slice? Well, I know I am. Now, the nice thing about this cake recipe, unfrosted, you can leave it on the counter for a few days, so long as it's well wrapped. It also freezes fantastically well. Once you have the cream cheese glaze on there, well, then you need to keep the cake in the fridge. But with all that applesauce, it will stay moist for days. Oh, look at that cake. When I sliced into the cake, not a crumb fell out of it. And instantly, when I lifted the slice, I could smell that combination between the cinnamon and the cardamom. Oh, the apple comes through on the finish, I find. That's the thing when it comes to applesauce, as opposed to fresh apples. It's a cooked apple flavor. How delicious. I really hope you give this recipe a try, with or without the cream cheese glaze. It is spectacular. You can whip it up in a snap, and the house will smell divine the whole hour it's baking. I love hearing your comments below. I've got lots more recipes in store, so I'll see you again for another delicious bake-along. There's the apple. Oh yeah. There's a reason this recipe calls for 2 cups of applesauce.